Vanakkam United Reds from around the world. Welcome back to the pod where we live and breathe Manchester United. Those late night heartaches, fist pump joys, and endless tactical rants over a cup of chai. Tonight's episode is pure away day fire. We are diving deep into two massive road battles that tested our mettle. First up, that London Stadium thriller against West Ham. A shock halftime opener, Hammers parking the bus, and ending in a dramatic 96th minute Sesko equalizer to snatch a point. Then, the brand new Dickinson Stadium grind, where Everton were a tough nut to crack, but Sheshko's 71st minute header securing a gritty victory for us. We are going to discuss it all in detail. Let's jump in. Des, we are back after a short break on the pod, and the break seems to have jinxed United's victory run. We couldn't make it 5 and 5.
Hey, Sanjay, everyone. Yeah, like you rightly said, Sanjay, there's been a jinx, I guess, after the short break that we've taken. We've not been able to make it 5 and 5. We were really hopeful that after the fourth victory against Tottenham, we'd go in and win against West Ham. But we knew what was coming. We knew teams that would sit back and defend and, make us grind, try and break us down if you're not able to attack and break the deadlock with the teams that sit back and defend in their box. So we see that happen with West Ham. We had Everton where we won 1-0. So both these games have a similar pattern. We have lots to discuss. We definitely did not make it 5 and 5. A lot of reasons that we need to talk about, especially the lack of sharpness and finishing. That's one of the biggest factors that we've seen. Carrick mentioned this during his post-match interview. We lack that edge shown against the games, against teams like Arsenal and City, where we had less of possession, where we were able to attack on the counter and break those teams down. But against a resilient West Ham team, we had 65% of the possession, but we struggled to convert. And we dominated in possession, but unfortunately we couldn't score and finish the game off. So I think it was disappointing to see that happen. Although we're very positive that we came out with a draw in the West Ham game, and then we were able to beat Everton at home. I'm sorry, at their home, away both games. So going back to the same point about lack of sharpness in finishing, we had a lot of chances early on in both games to try and put the game to bed, but we didn't capitalize on those chances. You had versus West Ham, you had Luke Shaw who forced a goal line clearance from Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and then you had wasted opening chances from both Ahmad and from Cunha. Both missed opportunities to test the West Ham goalkeeper. And you also had Xerxes miss a late goal, a header during the end of the game. So I think that spoke volumes about how we fail to break down teams, like we spoke already. One of the factors as to why we were not able to come out victorious, right? Also, a defensive lapse at the restart from the Everton game when in the second half, where although we dominated possession in the first half, second half Everton took over and we were unable to break them down. There was this Thomas Suchek West Ham lead that gave them the 50th minute lead, with Jared Bowen capitalizing in on a Luke Shaw mistake out of position, and Suchek ghosted in the box and then finished that goal through Senna Lomans' leg. So that was one of the defensive lapses that we'd seen. We'd have to stick on to this defensive rigidity and defensive stability that we've got throughout the game, and we cannot afford to have these lapses, especially when teams are breaking on the counter and trying to attack. So that's one of the factors that went against us. And then there was also this VAR heartbreak as well that we had versus West Ham. Casemiro's header, was denied by VAR after a lengthy VAR check, and then we had to start the game all over. With West Ham, we had Nuno Espirito Santo's side, who were very resilient in midfield. They kind of parked the bus, they crowded the midfield out, and they did not give Bruno Fernandes or Kobe Mino too many chances. They won a lot of the midfield duels, which kind of blocked the balls going into the final third. They also forced us to play wide, and that's where Mbumo and Ahmad found it really difficult to beat their markers at the very end. So it was a gritty game. Both games spoke volumes about how we need to stabilize, we need to build in terms of midfield stability, how we need to also ensure that we don't have lapses in defense as well. Very important, and we definitely need to look forward to how we'll set up against similar teams in the future.
Now, any other similarities that you saw in the way United played in both these games? And I specifically want to ask you about how we are doing on the flanks. So,
Mm,
Patrick Dogu was peaking. He had a long stretch of run in terms of games on the left flank.
mm,
Initially, he wasn't doing great, but then he started doing well. Unfortunately, he picked up that injury.
mm,
So, we kind of are missing him on that left flank. On the right flank, we are dependent on Diego Dallo to go up
mm.
front from his right back position. But I'm somehow not convinced if he's the right person for that role because we end up not getting those passes in the box. What do you think?
Okay. First, I'll touch upon the similarities in both games, and then we'll move on to our
Right.
defensive stability and our wing backs, especially Dorgu and Dallo.
Hmm.
Dorgu, of course, is injured. Carrick changed his position from a wing back to a winger up front, where he was doing well, and then suddenly he went off injured. Tallow needs improvement, and we'll talk about in detail. But yeah, first back to the similarities in both games, right? Despite one being a draw, West Ham being a draw, and the other a win, I think the
Hmm.
narrative was pretty identical. We relied heavily on defensive resilience, and of course, the super sub factor played a bigger part in us coming out with a draw and a win in both games. Of course, it's Benjamin Sesko. So we'll talk about that in detail. In both games, we expected the team to sit back and defend, and we would hold possession completely and try to break down their defense and make those passes through midfield, and also try and put in crosses through the box. We had Sheshko later, who came in as the target man, but with Mbumo, Cunha, and Ahmad, as seen in the previous games, we expected them to score, but with teams sitting back and defending, it made it really, really difficult. So that was the deciding factor in the game. If you look at Everton, it was slightly different with us losing a bit of momentum in the second half. Early on in the second half, they gained control of possession. Um, Close to about 30, 35 minutes, we'd seen that. That's when we were able to score in the 71st minute when we broke on the counter. And, where you see Sheshko making that lung busting sprint and scoring on the counter from Nembumo assist, right? So, in that sense, it clearly shows that we're still a counter-attacking team until under Carrick, and we need to change that completely, playing with possession. Versus West Ham, it was a similar story, but it's just that like Everton did in the second half, they did not dominate possession. They continued to defend, and they had this one chance where they broke on the counter and scored that one goal and used that as a cushion to try and defend for the rest of the game. So it was really, really difficult for us to break them down. It was a test of resilience for both sides, but yeah, at least we were able to come out with a draw at the end, where Shesko again saved us with that Mbomo assist, a great goal to make it 1-1 in the 96th minute. Saved us the blushes at the end, and we didn't go down, and we continued this winning streak, right? So that's the one thing that we've seen as a common factor. You know, Slight changes here and there, but pretty much a similar style of play from both the teams, especially with West Ham. They parked the bus completely, as opposed to what we've seen against Everton. Senna Lomans definitely has been a deciding factor as well, in not just in these two games, in the other games too. He's been this great wall at the back. He's communicating well with the defense. He's doing really well. So that's working in our favor. That's something that we need to look forward to. And we are relying heavily on counter attack, and that's pulling us down.
Hmm.
I know we keep repeating the same thing over and over again. We keep talking about it, but with West Ham, it was complete frustration in the first half. And for both teams, right? The first half was 0-0, and we went into the second half. We conceded a goal versus West Ham, then came back to draw versus Everton. Then we managed to score that winner. But it's been very, very difficult, where we are reliant completely on the counter attack. That would work only with teams who have the possession and then let us sit back and then break on the counter. So this is not going to work with the other teams, right? So that's very, very important. And then, of course, we have to talk about the defensive personnel and the shape that we hold as well. So we had an identical backline in both the games. We had of course, Harry Maguire and Lisandro Martinez, although Martinez has now picked up an injury. And then you had Luke Shaw and Diogo Dalot being used as inverted fullbacks with, providing midfield stability. They kind of, when they invert into midfield during attacks, that helps the attacking players to go much forward. So we used that shape, but it's just that we were not able to execute it to perfection, and we were not able to score those goals. We need to improve a lot in terms of the attack when we are trying to break down teams, make those defense splitting passes through the center, and also put in those crosses. So it has to be a combination of both, and we definitely need a lot of players if we have to change this. We just can't be labeled a team who only breaks on the counter, who only counter attacks. So that's going to be difficult. So similarities, yes, there were lots, but talking points. Takeaways is that we need to improve in the final third. We need to improve drastically in midfield as well. So Sanjay, with both away games at West Ham and Everton being a grind at the end, where we came out victorious at Everton at the Hill Dickinson Stadium, and we drew at West Ham. West Ham being a much tougher stadium as compared to Hill Dickinson because of the setup they have, because of the crowd. Maybe with Everton at Goodison Park, it would have been a different story altogether. But I think because of the new stadium, it's slightly different. But if you look at our away form, I know in the last few years we've been struggling to get those away wins. Right at home, it's a different story. I know we've performed bad at home as well. If you look at the home record in the recent years, it's been appalling sometimes. But away wins are very, very important as far as the season is concerned. So, how difficult is it to play away from Old Trafford at other stadiums? So, what is your thought on that, Sanjay?
Yeah, so that's the beauty of the Premier League system. So,
Mm,
how the Premier League has been set up is you have 20 teams in the league, and they will have to play twice against every opponent, one at
mm,
home and one away.
mm, mm,
And that is probably the only leveling factor that you have in terms of getting to play at home with your own fans and then
mm.
traveling away. Because
Yeah.
unlike cricket, where say within India, you have so many grounds, so many different pitches which behave differently, right?
Mm,
Where it's not the same. Where just say if you play in India doesn't mean India would have the advantage everywhere because each track, each pitch behaves differently. But in football, you don't have that pitch advantage. It's just the crowd.
yeah.
It's just the fans that give you that energy, that boost. So I want to cover this question that you asked. I have three different points that I want to cover, right? One is the stadiums, right? So if we talk about West Ham, pre 2016, they were at Upton Park, and
Mm,
the atmosphere there was tight, hostile, intimidating, right?
mm,
But
mm, yeah.
post 2016, they've moved to the London Stadium, which
Mm,
was originally designed for the 2012 Olympics. So
yeah. Correct.
you have the football pitch in between, then you have, or previously had the
Mm,
running
mm,
tracks, and then the stands where the fans are seated. I think they've covered the tracks now, but that gives a different feeling. So at Upton Park, it was very uptight. You had
mm,
the fans right next to you, and that's why I said it was intimidating. But here, it feels the pitch is very vast
mm,
because you have the fans seated away.
mm,
And this also, the change that I spoke about pre 2016 and post 2016, also kind of coincides with the dominance that we've had. So if you look at the record at Upton Park, that also coincides where we had Sir Alex Ferguson managing United. We lost only 7 times out of 46 meetings across all competitions at Upton Park.
wow.
However, post 2016 at the London Stadium, we've won only one out of the last 5 matches there. Our our win record has kind of dropped by about 40% post the
Mm,
moment.
mm, mm,
So I don't know if it's a change, if it's a jinx in terms of a new stadium,
yeah.
but that has been there. Two, where the away factor comes in is right the crowd, the capacity. So at
Mm,
home
mm,
at Theatre of Dreams, you have about 70,000 odd United fans, right? So
yeah.
how this is set up is every club they have a particular capacity in terms of the number of seats for every game,
Mm,
and they will have to allot 10% or 3,000 tickets to away fans, whichever is lower. So if you talk about theatre of dreams, we have about 72 to 73,000 is the overall capacity, give or take 3,000 for the away fans. You still have
Yeah.
70,000 fans rooting for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
When we take a trip to the London Stadium, the capacity is around 62,000. You have about 59,000 West Ham fans against 3,000. We are placed at the Sir Trevor booking stand. Uh, 3,000 against 60 odd thousand, we wouldn't even be heard, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
you are primarily up against uh, the 11 West Ham players and then 60,000 fans who are rooting for them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very, very intimidating, right? Now, it's a very similar setup at Everton. They previously at the Goodison Park. They recently moved to the Hill Dickinson Stadium at Liverpool.
Mm,
53,000 is the capacity, 3,000 is the away fans. But the feeling at the Hill Dickinson is very, very different. The stands are steep and they are
mm,
close to the action. So you feel
yeah.
choked. You feel the fans are right there. So imagine so many fans singing and chanting and abusing you, right? You have a lot more to think about the tactics and the formation and what's happening on the field,
Yep.
right? Second is how the home teams prepare. So when I say home teams, these two teams in question, West Ham and Everton, you touched upon it lightly. They adopt a low block for this, right? They crowd the middle and force United to go on the sides. And that's
Mm,
where we spoke about where we are not strong on the flanks. Diego Dallo is not great. We are missing Doggo on the left flank.
mhm,
So we are kind of forced to go on the sides, and players like Bruno are kind of neutralized. So that's
mhm,
the approach that these teams have. They also have aerial prowess. So if
mm,
you talk about West Ham, you have players like Suchek and Mavropanos who are
yeah.
tall, who kind of win these duels, who win the set piece battles. If you talk
Mhm,
about Everton, you have Tarkowski and Michael Keane. So
yeah.
it really is a battle. And then United also kind of fall into the counter-attacking trap. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where United feel that they have to dominate. They kind of commit bodies forward and they become
Mhm,
vulnerable when West Ham and Everton kind of break. So in almost every recent defeat that United have faced, they've conceded
mm,
goals while transitioning disorganized.
yeah.
So that's something that has been hitting us badly. And if you talk about specific players or specific people, for
Mm,
West Ham, we have Van Bissaka, right? Aaron Van
yeah.
Bissaka spent a good few seasons with United. He knows how United work.
Mm, mm,
So he's able to bring that on. I'm sure he would have passed on that information to the West Ham team.
yeah.
He knows what kind of approach would be. He is also instrumental in neutralizing Luke Shaw.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's something which was defining in the game.
Mm,
And we talk about Everton, we have David Moyes, who, though he spent only 9 months, I'm sure behind the screens there was a lot more because I'm sure
yeah.
before he took over from Sir Alex Ferguson, a lot of prep would have gone to it.
Yeah.
He understands how this team works, he understands how Carrick thinks. So
Mm,
all these factors away from the pitch also decide what's happening on the pitch. And the third point I want to cover is what you call the training ground monotony. So
mm,
if you look at these two games, these were two back to back away games, and we played them with a gap of about 13 days because we did not have
yeah.
the FA Cup fixtures. We are not there in the FA Cup. So we had 13 days. Now that's a huge gap. And what happens during this time is the players are forced to just play at the training grounds. They play 11 vs 11. You have your tactical matches going on. You
Yeah.
you aren't playing real opponents, right? So
Exactly.
mentally you have to be stable. Mentally you have to be ready for this. And especially for these two games, what I read was that players had to go through additional training to handle the set pieces
Yeah.
because both these teams kind of have a crowding effect when set pieces are there. In fact, Senna Lomans said that he had to visualize all those bodies right next to you. And what he said was, it's not about catching the ball, but
Yeah.
it's about surviving the collision and staying focused for the next one. Right.
Exactly.
So, what United have had to do or will have to do for away games is that they will have to have a tactical chameleon mindset, which means they need to know when to play like a giant and they also
Mm,
need to know when to fight like an underdog.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's very very important
Yeah.
when away games, especially with teams who you spoke about crowding the box and
Yep.
being very physical and all that, right? Arsenal started this trend. You see Everton deploying that. You see all the teams with big players like you had in West Ham, Thomas Suchek and Tarkowski, who who are in the box in your face trying to make things difficult for the keeper and the defenders. So I think that's the tactic that's been adopted by a lot of teams, and it's turning to be ugly. We don't want to see this as a trend, but yeah, let's see. I know you touched slightly upon Aaron Wan-Bissaka as well. Previously, one of our own, now with West Ham. Even if he did know the tactics or whatever we did at United, I think he's one of the best 1v1 defenders in the league right now,
Oh yeah.
right? You go 1v1 with him, you cannot come out successful because he's brilliant at that. He tracks back really well. He watches how the opposition player runs in. He lunges in with those tackles, and I'm pretty sure you cannot get past him.
What
So
are they
defensive
called?
duty,
Telescopic legs, right?
telescopic legs. They call him the spider. Yeah, lots of nicknames, but I love him as a 1v1 defender. Brilliant. You cannot
Mm.
get past him. I
We shouldn't
remember
have
this
let
point.
him go. I think we should have somehow kind of held on to him and on the team.
Well, that's a topic that we should have a discussion on separately. But I think from a defensive duty standpoint, he was brilliant. But going forward, he was not that great with United with the style of play that we had. But brilliant in defense, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. You compare that to Diogo Dalot that we have. I know you asked me this question. I failed to touch upon this previously. Diogo Dalot has been very very inconsistent, I should say. Not just this period within the Carrick era or with Amorim. He's been on and off. If you look at his career overall with United, right? So he switches on suddenly. He's playing a brilliant game. He makes those crosses, and then for a few games he's completely out. He's off pace. He's not able to perform, and then you and me start talking about why he needs to be sent out, and all that happens. So I think we've lacked that consistency from Dalot, and I think we need to look for a better right back who would do his defensive duties as well as contribute on attack. So that's very very important.
Mhm.
Speaking of players who've contributed really well, I think the common factor between both West Ham and with Everton is of course Benjamin Sesko. If not for him, we would not have drawn the match at West Ham, and we wouldn't have won. At the Hill Dickinson Stadium versus Everton. Brilliant goal, counter attack in the 71st minute. But his form has definitely been brilliant for us. He's been peaking at the right time for us, and I'm pretty sure he'll come up, in the ranks, and he'll become a regular starter. Talk about his form at the right time, Sanjay. How he's been performing so far.
No, Sheshko, right, like you rightly said, has been peaking at the right time. But that also brings us to another point.
Mm,
Given that United have not been doing great in the last decade, every signing you make comes in with a lot of expectation.
mm,
And that isn't great for an individual player. Like for someone like Sheshko coming new to the Premier League, new to England, there is an adaptation period that they require, right? And Sheshko has shown that he needs a brief adaptation period. He's shown that in his previous clubs as well at
mm.
Red Bull. But I somehow feel there's a lot of expectation. We just expect every signing to be that miracle, right? To come in with
Yeah,
a
yeah.
magic wand and to start performing from day one. And
Mm,
when they don't do that, we kind of start brutally talking about how they're not great, they were not worth the price tags. We kind of don't consider the factors that they are moving into a new country, they're moving into a new
yeah.
environment. So mentally, there's a lot that they have to go through. They have to settle in. And that's something that we see in our own lives. You move from one city to another, it takes a lot of time
Mm,
for us to feel settled. Sheshko initially had that challenge, but he's done great. He scored 6 goals in the last 7 games, and he's averaging 1.65 goals for 90 minutes. And that's currently the highest in the Premier League. Next up is Erling Haaland at 1.02 goals in 90 minutes. And
mm.
out of these 6 goals, three have been winning goals against Fulham, Everton, and most recently Crystal Palace. right?
Yeah,
Now
after being
he's been our super sub. I was just coming to that, right? So he's been our super sub against West Ham. He came on for 21 minutes and scored the winner. Against
mm,
Everton, he came on for 32 minutes and scored the winner, right? And he's also using his height advantage. He's 6'4". He's winning those aerial duels. So in every game, he averages about 6 aerial duels that he wins. The
yeah,
other interesting factor that we see is out of the 6 goals that he scored, 4 have been assisted by Bruno.
mm,
And Bruno has publicly stated that Sesko's movement allows him to play riskier passes because Sesko is fast enough to recover them. So that
yeah,
also shows that Bruno has the ability. We've seen that for seasons now, but has not had a target to whom he
mm,
can put in those crosses. Now,
yeah,
Sheshko is proving to be that person, and I just hope that he continues this red hot form, right? This is great, but we really need to see him start more matches. That will say that the manager has more confidence in him. That will boost his own confidence. And I think we need that high to end this season. We have only about 10,
yeah,
12 games to go. We need
mm,
him to continue because we've seen strikers come, we've seen strikers perform, but the consistency has been lacking. And I just hope
yeah,
that he is able to address that issue for us.
yeah, definitely. And I think he needs to start more games too, Sanjay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And we've been talking about these games. One thing I wanted to understand from you, Des, is why are we not able to kill games? So, Everton away, Everton have not been doing great overall, but we only managed to get a 1-0 victory against them. And
Mm,
we've spoken about this in the past as well. We are not able to kill games. We do not have that killer instinct in us to go and finish games, put it to rest. We kind of drag it till the end. What is missing?
Okay, $1 million question. And I know we've been going through this over and over and over again. So, the central theme of this tactical evolution has definitely been our inability to break teams who deploy the low block. That's been the common factor. That's been something that's been haunting us for quite some time now. Particularly during the transition from the Ruben Amorim era to now to Michael Carrick right now. While we have significantly improved, in terms of the goal tally compared to a disastrous 2024-2025 season, I think killing games has been really difficult for us with a mix of personal as well as the tactical rigidity that we've been speaking about, right? So, uh, you know, while we've been moving the ball from side to side, during those positions, and we wait just for a moment of magic to try and score those goals, we wait for a cross to come in, etc. So once we are pinned back in defense, and once the opponents learn our tactics, especially in the 3-4-3 system, they were able to try and beat us on the counter and score those goals. And plus, we've also been heavily reliant on transitions again, which takes us back to the counter attacking game that we've been playing right now. We've got Brian Mbomo, we've got Matheus Cunha, who are dangerous on the break. We've got Ahmad, who's got great pace. Shesko has proven it that he can run at 35 kilometers per hour. Against the game against Everton. So you have all these players with great pace, and we are lethal on the counter. You've seen that happen previously. But when it comes to the low block neutralization, when teams sit back, what they do is they eliminate this fast break. So you have teams attacking, and then like City, like Arsenal, you have them attacking right in front. And then when there's a break, we pick up the ball. You have a huge space in midfield, and there's finally 3 versus 2 defenders, or 3v4, or whatever it is, and then we go and score. So that hasn't happened, right? So we've given the teams time to sit back and defend, and we are unable to break them down. So this reliance on the counter attack is not working for us. So we need to transition. We need to find that balance between attack as well as defense, and ensure we take this tag out of us being a transition team. So that's very, very important. And another important point to note, right? We're talking about modern day football. We're talking about modern day tactics. We have to speak about something called the line breaking defenders. When I say line breaking defenders, you'll get to know it when I talk about it more. You would have often seen Lisandro Martinez stepping out from defense, running into midfield, taking the ball and making those passes. Right? You don't see ball playing centre backs nowadays. When I say nowadays, it's United in specific. I'm not referring to other teams. You see similarities with Alessandro Bastoni at Inter Milan. You see him as a ball playing centre back. You don't have such a character at United. You have these four players sitting at the back trying to defend when the opponent tries to attack. But if you look at Lisandro Martinez, you see him running into midfield at times to trying to make that pass. He'd go 30, 40 yards into the opposition half and make those passes. So that kind of disrupts the opponent's shape. So we're lacking that too. So we need one or two X factors to try and help us get us over the line. So that's very, very, very important. And then of course, we've got set piece goals coming in as well. Although we've scored a lot of goals, we need to start cutting down on us conceding goals too. So that's something that we need to work on. Killing games off definitely depends on the players that we've got as a unit. It's not just the attack. It's not just midfield alone. It's not just defense alone. All of these factors put together. Like I said earlier, we need an overall in midfield. Casemiro leaving. We've spoken at length about his departure. You only have Bruno Fernandes. What if Saudi come calling and he might leave if the club decide to sell him for over 100 million? We want to cash on that money definitely, right? So we need to have alternatives. We need to have a strong bench, and we also need to learn how to break teams down. So that's very, very important. That's why we are unable to shut teams down and kill the games, ensure we come out victorious, rather than coming out with a draw, especially away games. Yeah, so that's what it is, and that's something that we need to focus on in the future.
So you spoke about the low block that the opponents adapt and us not
Mm.
being able to break it. So this is a hypothetical question. If you're
Okay.
given an opportunity to bring back an ex-United player
Okay.
from the past to this setup, who can help you break that low block? Who would that be?
Um, See, of course, for you to need to break the low block, to break down teams defensive who sit back and defend, it's very, very important that you have more creative players. So we already have Bruno Fernandes in that position right now, and you need someone similar to try and create those chances for us. I think Juan Mata was definitely one of them.
Hmm.
Although he was not fast, he did not have much of pace, but he definitely had that creative style of play in him, similar to Bruno, and he helped us a lot. So I would definitely bring in Juan Mata from the past. He would definitely create a lot of chances for this team. um I know you spoke about the breaking teams down, but I would also want Ander Herrera to come in.
Oh
Of course,
yeah,
he's a defensive midfielder,
I
but
was
he
going to
worked
ask
his
you that.
socks off. Yeah, yeah, he
Yeah.
worked his socks off all the time, and I'd be happy to see him come back into the team, even if he's old right now. But what level of commitment he showed when he played for us, brilliant. So, but yeah, to answer your question, someone like Juan Mata would definitely help us at this point.
Great. So that brings us to the end of episode 5. We had taken a short break, and that's why we had to cover 2 games on this episode. A big thanks to all our loyal fans who've been tuning in and listening to us on Spotify. Please do spread the word, get more people to follow us, and continue looking out for our new episodes and listening to them. We also have launched our Instagram page under the same name, the Madras United Podcast, where you will be seeing snippets and bites of these episodes. So follow us there as well and spread the word. We have Crystal Palace up next, so we'll catch up at you with our thoughts on that game. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Desmond.